How do you stay up to date with the latest Agile approaches and frameworks and practices? Can I recommend any way, any resources, any approaches to staying on top of this stuff? Yeah, because it's my job. It's what I do. So how do I stay on top of it? I read, and I read a lot. You can see a very, very small part of my collection. I've only just moved back away from Kindle. And I originally moved to Kindle because I had about 500 workbooks, and that's not portable. So I have a digital reader, but I'm finding that I actually quite like the real thing once more. But you're going to need to read a lot. Books. Okay? What I recommend is if you don't have it, you start a reading list. It will turn into, in no time at all, a little bit of a list of doom, and you will not get through it all. That's not the purpose. Every time somebody recommends a book, it goes on the list. Every time. Doesn't matter what it's about. As Scrum Masters, we have the privilege and the pleasure of reading way beyond the Agile world because we work with people. It's not just about getting better technical practices or better Agile practices or any of that. It's about creating teams that are highly effective at solving problems. So you probably do want to stay on top of the books that are being produced in the Agile world. But you also want to stay on top of things coming out of the coaching world and the facilitation world and the business world and the organizational change world and the mentoring world and the teaching world. And it goes on. And for me, this is actually what really excites me, is because you've got such a broad range. And you can see some things around military strategy and philosophy and all sorts, because this all comes back to people. So get yourself a list. What's the wish list of books that you're going to tackle this year? Personally, mine starts on January 1st. And I add and I add and I add, and we're at the end of July, and I've got a lot of books on there already. I'm not going to share the number because it scares me, never mind you. And on December 31st, I delete it because I haven't got to it. Not because there are books on there that I don't want to read anymore, but because there are so many books that I do want to read, and I know I don't have time. I get through 50 to 100 workbooks a year, and I know that people are going to continue to give me other great ideas way beyond my ability to learn it. So start reading articles, start listening to podcasts, watching videos, consume all this information, however works best for you. And this is one of the great things with all the technology that is coming out these days, is there are so many channels to get this information in. Okay? A simple video like this will be turned into a podcast. It will be turned into an article. At some point, I can't imagine this one, but some of them may be turned into talks at conferences. So get yourself out there. Go to user groups, go to conferences to supplement the reading. You will get more books because you're going to be talking to people who've read other things and done other things and found other things useful. You're going to hear talks, which are often distillations of that person's book or some books that they've read, all combined together with the context in which they work, their experiences, their case studies. All brilliant because it's more information that comes in so that when a thing happens at work, we have some ideas, options, and those are incredibly useful because there is no one right answer to what we do. Okay? So having a few possible things. Oh, well, I read about this in that book and I read an article on that and this person was talking about that at that conference, and all three of those could work. Well, great, I've actually got three options. I've got more than three because maybe it's some sort of synthesis of those three. Worst case, I read a book and it's kind of in the right place and that's kind of in the right place, and I met a few people, so I'm going to ping them on LinkedIn and just ask if I can have 10 minutes of their time to bounce some ideas around with them and see. This all adds. Now, one of the other things that I've developed over the years is, well, I've spent a lot of time in coaching on my relationship with books. I love books. I've been brought up to almost revere them. They're fantastic. They're receptacles of knowledge. They're to be treated with reverence, and that's not healthy. Okay, this is a book. Let's go with Brené Brown's. Okay, there you go. Brave in the Wilderness. It's a great book. All right. But here's the thing. You don't have to read it all. Okay. You do not have to start on page 1 and go all the way through to page 170-ish, 160 something, and think, and I'm done. What you can do is go, well, where does this chapter end? Let's jump to the end of the chapter and read the summary. And just the summary. Because you know what? Business books in particular, this doesn't work for fiction. Business books summarize the end of every chapter. This is what we talked about. These are the key takeaways. So you can go through a book and start cherry picking. Well, reading the summary, there's nothing in this chapter for me. Reading that summary, oh, I've not heard of that model. That's an interesting take on that aspect. I'm going to read the whole chapter to understand better the author's position. They're a tool, and use them as such. It means that you can get through an awful lot more material, because what you will start realizing the more you read is the more everybody uses the same foundational sources, which is a brilliant thing, because you can get through more stuff. You can start saying, well, actually, that's an interesting angle on that. Don't really care about those 3 chapters, but here's the 5 things in this book that are good. What I also found was, as those foundational things start popping up and you hear the same research appear or the same books appear, I go and read those books, because the chances are that in reading that book, I can skip half a dozen books later on, because I've read the stuff that they're built upon. Okay? And if that doesn't take your fancy, use one of the tools like Blinkist. Blinkist takes a book, so you probably will find Braving the Wilderness in there, okay, as a 10 to 15 minute snippet, just the key highlights across the whole book. Okay? So you can read it, you can stick your headphones in, listen to it, and somebody will tell you what matters. And in fact, that's the start of my filtering process for reading. Okay? If somebody recommends a book, I will stick it into something like Blinkist. And is that going to tell me anything that catches my interest? Is it going to make me want to read more? Or am I just going to go, kind of heard all that before, it's not adding to me? And if that's the case, I'll move on. But if it's interesting, I'll go get the book, and I won't treat it with reverence, and I'll make notes all over it and scribble on it. And I've not got to tearing bits out yet. I can't bring myself to do that, but I do know some of them, it'd be brilliant if I could just tear a page out, because it's really all I want from the whole book. But I can get through it. And I'm lucky my memory works in a way that actually I can catalogue a lot of it in my head. But I also know people who make diligent notes in note-taking tools, so they've got that reference. Whatever works for you to get the value from the book, and just drop the rest of it. Okay? So when you start doing these things, what you notice is intersections. I read very broadly, because what I've noticed over the years is the disciplines intersect in interesting ways. What you may think of as coaching pops up again in organizational change, pops up in facilitation, pops up in team dynamics. And you start realizing you're picking on something that is more integral to our job than can be nailed down in any one aspect of it. It's just a thing we need to know. And that helps your practice hugely. And it's from there that not only can you stay on top of the agile practices, because you start recognizing them and saying, oh, that's playing on this and that's playing with that. And what often happens, that's just a reimagination of this existing practice from a different discipline. But you can also start crafting your own. You start recognizing, well, actually a bit of this and a bit of that becomes interesting, and you can add to the community. And I believe that any agile coach or scrum master who's really worth their salt is wanting to do that. Not only consume, but create, add to our world, and make it a better place, make it easier for everybody to make use of your learning. Okay? So that would be from me to you. Don't learn for selfish reasons. Okay? We learn because we want to be better in our roles. We want to learn to improve our teams, to improve our organizations. But we should also be learning so that we can share the outcomes of that learning, those insights, with everybody else, so that they can continue that journey after you.